Hi, guys. Welcome back to It's All Light. I'm your host, Natalie Baugh, and I'm so excited to come to you this week with today's guest, Taylor Church.
Hello.
So, Taylor, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Let's see. I moved around a bunch. I've lived in Arizona, Nevada, Washington, Utah. But been in Utah for a while. I'm a writer, so I have a few books published. I do a podcast myself. It's called Of Stone and Clay. It's kind
Cool.
of yeah, it's kind of just about life, just about kind of digging into people's souls and figuring out what makes people passionate and what makes people tick. And I play semi-professional spike ball, which is a weird detail
Whoa, that is
about
cool.
um yeah, kind of a random hobby that got out of control.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
S-
So yeah, I grew up playing basketball a lot. I coached high school basketball for a few years. I was a history major at UVU. Served an LDS mission in Brazil. Um, yeah, those are my main resume data points.
Wow, that's cool. And now, what's like a random fun fact? You shared the spike ball one, but like, I guess we'll learn a little bit more when we talk about what you light up about. But before you do that, you said you're a
Sure.
writer. What's one of your books people could
Mhm.
look out for?
Um, so I have three books. One is called I'm Trying Here. It's kind of a funny, self-deprecating memoir about dating and relationships, being in your
Ooh,
20s.
interesting.
Um, yeah, and then I mean it's by no means like an instructive book or like this is how you date book. It's just like my stories and things I've been through.
That's pretty awesome.
And then
Is it like on Amazon?
yeah,
Cool. That's awesome.
yeah. Yeah, and then I have a book called Return Not Desired, which is about the Holocaust. Um,
Whoa.
and then I have a novel called Nevertheless, the Fish Are Dead and the Chair is Broken, which is a long, obscure title. Um, so yeah,
Wow. From what I gather, you're a very deep person. I mean, I actually
uh,
don't know where we met, probably in like a ward or at a friend party or something, but like all of the points you've
yeah.
shared about yourself are very deep leveled, which is really cool and interesting.
Thank you.
You would agree? You feel that in your soul?
I don't know. I think I like to pursue depth. I think you know going out and announcing how deep you are is actually really shallow. but
Yes. Yes. Okay.
so yeah, I mean depth is a spectrum just like anything else. So I think I like to pursue deep things. How deep that makes me, I don't know. I think we're all deep in some areas and shallow in others.
The pursuit of depth. I love it. So what
Yeah.
else do you light up about? I mean, we have a decent little background about who you are, where you're from, etc. But what do you light up about? What are your passions?
I think this is a hard question because this is like you're essentially asking like what are you passionate about, right? What makes you really happy? What makes you tick? And
Yeah.
there's probably like four or five main things. And for me, I do better in life mentally when I don't have all my eggs in one basket. Um,
Hmm.
when there's when there's multiple sources of joy in my life. Um, of course, I get joy and I get light from my faith and my religion, my pursuit in that. Um, I get a lot of light just from art, which encompasses my writing, podcasting, but it's also consuming good art. It's listening to podcasts, it's reading good books, it's watching good movies that inspire me and make me want to create more myself. Um, and so
Hmm.
I'll have days that I just like all I do is like record a podcast and read for 5 hours, and I feel amazing.
Every day
And
you read for 5 hours,
no,
or
no,
this is just an
no, no. I said,
example.
yeah, I said
Oh,
I'll
okay.
have days like that.
Wow, that's
I
awesome.
mean, Hey, in a perfect world, that sounds like a great life
Yeah,
for me. But
for real.
I'm also very extroverted, so
Hmm.
I can enjoy that time digging into a piece of art, but I'm also like always hanging out with people and always going to dinner with friends and doing things. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think probably the main thing that makes me light up is people. Just being
really.
around people that I love and people that make me laugh and people that make me think. So yeah,
I love that. I feel like 90% of the people I have on this podcast, that is their answer, which is just the
yeah.
fact of life. People need people. And
Well,
it's
and the
just
truth
it's just
is,
cool.
like, yeah, and you're also probably more likely to get extroverts to be on a podcast.
Also very true, yes.
So your
Yeah.
your 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 data might be a little skewed, but
True, true. Yeah.
but yeah,
I think I've gotten a few introverts on here, but yeah, I think if you give this podcast a chance or listen to it, you can tell who's extroverted and who's not. But you would say you are an
yeah.
extrovert.
Oh, to the very core, yeah,
Really? Okay. I like that. Me too. So it's something I can relate more on. Although the older I get, the more introverted I feel, which I feel like is my pathway of like pursuing depth, and what that looks like,
hmm
and taking that time to maybe listen to more podcasts or read more books or just kind of soul search, right? I feel like I've been in
yeah,
a groove where I'm like, I want to soul search. Like, what about life do I need to work on right now and figure out?
yeah.
How do you feel like you do that in your life?
Um, how do I soul search?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I think you try to come up with a way where it's, at least for me, I try to live my life where, like, that's just kind of a constant
Mm-hmm.
byproduct of how I'm living my life.
Just
Like
always
I'm
self-reflecting.
certain. Yeah, I'm trying to break things down. I'm trying to think about things, and it's not me putting in my Google Calendar, hey, let's soul search later this week. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Right.
it's me just trying to get everything out of every experience, and then reflecting back on it and seeing what I could have done better, what I could have
Hmm.
learned.
So,
Yeah.
how do you incorporate that reflection? Like, is
A
that
lot of
time
it
you
for
set aside? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm not a big set asider.
Hmm.
I kind of go by feel. I don't like to. I have a lot of, like, to-do lists, but I don't like to plan things out very particularly. I like to kind of go with just what I feel that day. But for me, a lot of soul reflection is in my writing. It's like, if
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
a little bit unsure of how I feel about something, I write about it, and in that writing, I kind of discover what I actually think about something. Because sometimes you have all these just kind of jumbled thoughts, and you think you have an opinion about something, but even really personal things, like if I'm going through a breakup, I'll sit down and just write about it, and along the way, sometimes I realize, like, wow, like, I actually I actually really miss this person because of this and this and this, and I
Mm-hmm.
actually I actually don't really have these resentments I thought I had. I just That narrative was helping me move forward. There's so many things that
Interesting.
Yeah, there's so many things you don't really realize because you haven't really fleshed out your thoughts, and sometimes when they're in your head, they're kind of dangerous. Like, some of the thoughts, they make you sad, they make you self-destructive, and so you just kind of avoid them. But
Oh, yeah.
when I just sit down and flesh it out and really write everything out, I can kind of really come to terms with what I actually feel.
Hmm. That is so wise. And I feel like people tell that to us often, but the actual implementation is really hard. Do you try to journal every day? Is that something you've built in your life?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I but here's the thing. I think a lot of people struggle with journaling because they're not writing isn't something that comes easy to them. And
Mm-hmm.
so to them it becomes they either feel like, oh, I haven't written in my journal for a week, so I have to write 20 pages, or
Mm.
they're like, I'm writing every day and nothing is happening, so I'm just writing like, oh, I went to lunch today and went to work and
It's
I'm
like,
kind
what?
of
Why would
tired.
I
Like,
write that? Yeah.
yeah, so I focus on not events, but I focus on feelings,
Write down what you're
right? So
feeling more than.
yeah, I,
Mm.
yeah, and so I like to write down certain events to remember them, but it's more like, yeah, I went to dinner with so and so tonight. It was fun, but the reason it was fun is because I cherish these conversations so much, and I realize when I'm opening up, like it just becomes more about what's going on in my head than actually just replaying events.
Hmm. That's so interesting. So, have you always been a writer? Like you said, you've written books. Like, did you love writing all
Um,
growing up?
kind of. It kind of snuck up on me. It's funny. Like I have completely like thoroughly finished journals since like first grade. Like I
Mm-hmm.
just always wrote in a journal, but it wasn't like me thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be a writer when I grow up."
Hmm.
It was just this weird compulsion to like document my life, which is maybe a weird sentiment as like a 9 year old. Um, but
Amazing.
but yeah, but yeah, I just wanted to document things, and then as I got older and got to become a better writer and a better reader, it became more, yeah, more of what was in my heart than just like, yeah, I played basketball today and I scored 8 points, and Jimmy was mean to me, and
That's
I have a
amazing.
crush on Sarah,
I love it. Wow. Okay. So, your first book was which one again?
It's called I'm Trying Here.
I'm
Yeah,
trying
just kind
here.
of a
Funny
yeah,
memoir.
yeah,
And what advice would you maybe give someone who wants to write a book one day? Like, how did you get there?
yeah. Here's what I would say, and this might come off a little bit snobbish, but I just I so often get people tell me like, "Oh, I want to write a book someday," and my
Mm-hmm.
response is usually like, "Are you a writer at all? Like, are you interested in the craft of writing? Because like, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to finish a book, and then to publish a book is a whole nother beast. And
Mm-hmm.
so, to me, if you just kind of have this fun idea of, oh, I'd like to write a book someday, maybe maybe it's more like I want to write down this story I have in my head just for me. Um, but the idea of like I want to publish a book one day, like you better be a like you better be an English major. You better be reading all the time. You better be like
In
honing
writing
your
groups
craft.
or yeah. No, I've delved into it just a little because I do have that dream of, oh, I want to write a book one day. But I haven't ever
Mm-hmm.
done the things that I needed to because that's just not the time in my life right now. But I admire it. And I
Yeah.
love writers. I also just get overwhelmed going to like a library and just knowing how many people have written books and how many books are out there and where to even begin. I think my Goodreads, I have a pretty good stacked list of what books I want to be reading, but
Yeah.
it's kind of daunting sometimes to think about all the things we should be reading, we want to be reading. And of course,
Sure.
self-help books I think hit you in your mid 20s, you're throughout your 30s, you're wanting to read self-help books. But I'm also like, oh, I
Yeah.
still want to remember the magic of reading a fantasy book or a sci-fi mystery. So it's like
Yeah.
balancing
Mm-hmm.
when you make time for those and like you said, finding those days where you can just go read for 5 hours, and putting in that time.
Yeah.
What would you say your why behind doing that is? Obviously, you're a writer, you enjoy stories, you enjoy reading.
Mm-hmm.
But what else could maybe
Yeah.
help spark
Uh,
others?
to just read more.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, yeah, for me, like I was a late bloomer. Like I grew up like writing in my journal obsessively, but I didn't really start to love reading till I was like out of high school.
Mm.
when I was younger, I would read like nothing but sports books with a lot of pictures in it, like,
Nice. Love that.
and but that was kind of my gateway. That got me interested in learning facts, and learning about only things that I'm interested in. But I usually tell people like you have to read the right books or you're not going to enjoy it. Like
Totally.
for me, I know the genres that I love. I know the authors that I love, and like you said, there's a never-ending well of books I want to read. But most people that read like, because I would say most people, this is a really sad reality. I would say most people read 0 books a year,
Mm.
and then I would say, but I would say the average person reads 1 to 2 books a year,
Okay.
right? And so I think most people like the idea of reading. They like having read a good book, but they're too busy. They have ADD, whatever. Um, but for me, like if I'm not reading, I'm not in a good place. Like I need to be reading. I need to be consuming knowledge. I need to be consuming beautiful art. Like it's not just knowledge because I read a lot of fiction, but
Mm-hmm.
I need to be reading. I need to be consuming beautiful things. To me, it's like the same thing as like sometimes I need to just go outside and see a flower. I need to
Mm-hmm.
go see
Yeah.
I need to see a beautiful sunset. The same way I need to read a beautiful sentence.
I like that. And that just feels like part of your soul, right? As you're
Yeah,
describing
yeah,
this.
and
Yeah.
and and I also feel like the more you read, the more you get to live. Like you
Mm-hmm.
you dive into different characters' lives, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. You learn about people's experiences. You become more empathetic. You learn more
Oh,
about
totally.
culture. You learn more about people's different thought processes. And so I think it's a cool way to kind of live twice.
It's so powerful. And podcasts are pretty similar too, but the experience you get from reading versus listening to a podcast or even an audiobook. I do love audiobooks, but something about the words on a paper and reading them and processing it that way, I feel like just
Yeah,
makes a big difference. Ooh, you're getting
yeah,
me
totally.
excited. Like my soul's like, oh yeah, this has been missing in your life. And hopefully people
Yeah, yeah.
listening can question like, what gets your soul excited and what forms of art have you been missing out on that you need to take in? And maybe that's finding a good book and mapping out time
Yeah.
to read it. Or for me, going to an art museum. Like, I also love that you mentioned just like running outside to see a sunset. Like, sometimes get
Hmm.
up early and watch the sun come up will change a lot of perspective in your life. Do you have any examples where that has happened to you, Taylor?
Sorry, examples of what?
How art has just affected the course of your life, the course of your week.
Um, yeah, okay. Let me go a little bit more macro here, but
Okay.
for me, like, I'm so when consuming art, being books, movies, music, those are kind of my main three forms of media. It's like I'm so as a maker of art, I'm so concerned with the details of, like I said, a beautiful sentence or beautiful lighting in a movie or amazing lyrics in a song. And so a byproduct of that is I feel like I'm noticing more things just in my general life. I feel like I notice a little smirk on a stranger. I notice a specific gait of a family member. I notice the shift of a cloud, of a shadow. And it's not like I have an all-seeing eye that sees more than other people, but I'm just I'm just so much more interested in the details of life because those details are what I'm looking for in my art. And so
Mm.
I don't know, it just makes life more enjoyable, I think, when you are looking for little bursts of beauty.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. So you feel like you do a pretty good job of that, like daily? Like, what helps you remember to look for those things that feed your soul?
Yeah, it's just become a habit now.
Mm.
But I also started this journal that's like, it's not a traditional gratitude journal, but what it is and I started doing this when I was just having a really rough time, and I was having trouble figuring out. I was having trouble, like, on bad days, feeling like there was any redeemable part of the day. Feeling like this day was a total bust. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it might as well not have happened. And then I stepped back and I was like, that's such a horrible attitude. There's so many little moments of beauty in my day, but I forget about them because I'm so affected by negative emotion, unfortunately.
Interesting.
And so this journal becomes, what I do is I just write down good things that happened that day. And sometimes they're really small, like, oh, um I saw this beautiful sunset, or I got a really sweet text from my friend, or I watched this show that I was excited about.
Made you laugh or
Um,
something.
yeah, yeah, and the interesting thing I do is the next day, or if I miss a day or whatever, I'll come back and I'll highlight two or three of the best parts of each day,
Oh.
and so then I go back and I kind of end up seeing a pattern of what are the things that really make me happy and stand out and are important. And
Hmm.
they're usually kind of the same things. For me, they're usually like conversations with friends, or like a telephone call. Like, my mom called me, we talked for an hour, or and because sometimes in my head I think like this and this is what makes me happy, but then I go and look back at the data and it's like, no, like, these are the things that really made your day. And it was also helpful because there are days that are complete trash, like everything goes wrong, like someone breaks your heart, and then you slip in dog poop, and
Oh.
and then your car won't start, and
Oh
then
yeah.
like it and it's snowing. It's just, you're like,
And it's not.
today is just today is a nuclear disaster. But when I can just be like, okay, today was a bust, but like, my my freaking lunch was really good, okay, and there
Hmm.
was a really great funny back and forth in our group thread, and like, this package came in Amazon for me today. Like,
Yeah.
just focus on these little tiny wins, and then you realize, like, yeah, dude, every day is ups and downs, but like, there's just beauty all around.
That's so true. And I feel like we could talk about this every week on the podcast. And sometimes we do because it's something we're so easy to forget, like, especially when
Oh
those
yeah,
harder, bad things are happening. It's like we latch onto that. And I think sometimes it's because our brain is like avoiding pain, yet in a funny way, we like latch onto that. I don't really understand the psychology of it all, but I love that
yeah.
you said like collecting data, like going back to your journal entries and highlighting the most important things. Because it's one thing to write it all out and get it out on paper and help you discover as you write and reflect, but it's another thing to actually use it as like a tool to propel you or a tool to learn something new about yourself. Like sometimes I write, I'm like, why am I even journaling if no one's going to ever go back and read these, or if I don't even go back and read these? So it's cool. Maybe
Yeah,
just
yeah,
every 2 days, just highlight it. That's awesome.
yeah, totally.
And I'm going to use that as a segue into another way of collecting data in our lives through writing, through reflecting. But now I want to pivot to a passion about love and relationships because that's something I've heard is like, yeah, you spend time with someone to collect data and to know how you feel about them, right? And so it's like, okay, yeah, you're just
Mm.
gathering more data. Every decision you make is just more data, whether it's right, wrong, mistake, whatever. Like you make that decision, then you determine whether, like, what kind of data it is. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree in those early stages when you're dating. Yeah, I think a lot of it is you're collecting data, right? But I think a lot of times it's really abstract data that you're like, I don't really know what this means, but it makes me feel good. Or the opposite, like, I don't know why, but this kind of bugs,
Like
you
I'm
know?
not in. Yeah, no, and we've all felt
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I I started doing this thing um, a couple years back where I realized like you know how when you start talking to somebody and you've been out like let's say 3 or 4 times and you're like kind of interested but you can't really figure out how interested you are,
Mm-hmm.
but you're kind of like you want to be interested.
Mm.
Um, I started realizing, okay, to me, there's 5 pillars of dating, okay,
Let's go.
and the reason these pillars are important is because I think most people I would say consider all 5 things, but they don't consider them in order, and I
Hmm.
think they need to be in order.
Okay, so there's
Okay,
order to these 5 things. Got it.
yes. So I think first is personality.
Okay.
Okay, like of course you have to like have a bunch of other things, but if the personality is even like on a score of 1 to 10, if the personality is just a 7, like it's over. Like the person's got to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the problem is when you get outlier scores on the other ones, things get really confusing and murky. But so
Interesting.
you got
Okay.
you got personality
Has
first.
to be a
Then you
seven and a
have
half or above.
to me it needs to be like 8.5 plus. It needs to be
Okay.
crazy high
Crazy high
because
personality.
this is your person. This is who you want to be with the rest of your life. Like you better think the personality is everything,
And
right?
before we move on to the second point, what would you define personality as? Like compatibility personality or just someone who has like who they are innately is their personality and you're attracted to that?
It's kind of both, right? It kind of
Yeah.
encompasses just like how much you like that person, like
Just
being
naturally,
around
right?
them,
Yeah. Okay.
talking to them, like how interesting they are. Like it encompasses a lot, but that's why it's number one, right? Um,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then two, you have attraction slash intimacy, which you could argue doesn't need to be that high, but my argument is you're gonna struggle if it's not that high. Like, and
Yeah.
that's how you get your foot in the door. That's how you become obsessed with somebody is by having a high level of attraction, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But I will say attraction, your score doesn't need to be as high as personality.
Okay.
Okay, it just needs to be high enough, whatever that is for you. For some people, it's not as important, right? For others,
Mm-hmm.
it's super important. Um, so to me, that's more like yeah, it needs to be like a 7 plus. They just need to be really attractive to you, you
I
know.
like that. Yeah.
Um, and then from there, you got spirituality, which is more like just being on the same spiritual plane, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
is, you know. Even if you're atheist, like if they're super Christian, it's probably going to be tough, you know. Um,
Does that one encompass values as well? Or is that
it
separate?
could,
Okay.
yeah. Values you could put into spirituality, you could put into personality even.
That's
Um,
true.
there's that's the thing. There's a lot of subcategories, right? But fourth, to me, you have intellect, which again, for some people maybe isn't super important, but it's being on the same plane, right? It's seeing the world similarly.
Well, and being
Um,
able to have just deep, again, here we come back to deep, but in a way, deep
mhm,
conversations, because that's what I think every soul longs for. And if that's a deep conversation about pop culture, great. You know, like it can be on different levels
yeah,
at any time, but
yeah,
I love that one. That's a good one.
yeah, totally. And then the fifth is a little bit more ambiguous. It covers a lot. It's kind of your emotional wellness, your ambition, your mental health,
Mm-hmm.
your willingness to change, your willingness to admit you're wrong. Just kind of that whole I call it like emotional wellness,
And how
right?
you handle things, probably. I mean, that's something people have talked
Yeah,
about in dating. It's like, yeah, go on a road trip, give them tangled Christmas lights. You
yeah,
know, like you have to see how someone reacts, I guess, and deals with stuff.
totally. And so for me, the main point in focusing on these pillars is sometimes, like I said, you get really thrown off by outlier scores, right?
Ooh, yeah.
You're like attraction wise, they're close. They're like a 9.5. They're off the charts. It's crazy. I can't handle it. But they're like the but the personality is like a 6, And you're like,
Mm,
but their spirituality is 10 out of 10. They're super smart. They're really good with, but it's like, to me, you have to realize, like, if one of these areas is suffering too much, it's over, right?
wow. Yeah.
And so, because listen, how do you determine of the volume of a cube, right? You times each things, you times each side by each side,
The
right?
length
And
and
that
the
gets you the
width,
volume,
right?
right? Right.
Yikes.
But if you to me, if one of these is zero, then your score is zero.
Oh, right. Because anything by zero is zero. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
I think,
Okay. Or below a five, maybe, if you're doing scales out of 10.
yeah. You're not really gonna have a score that's zero. Like someone has zero intellect, someone.
Right. I love that. I
but
actually, oh, go
but
ahead.
yeah, no, I
You,
was just
you
gonna say,
go.
yeah. If it's too low, it's a zero, and
Mm-hmm.
it's game over. So I
Mm-hmm.
like to use that in those initial stages when I'm like, yeah, like we're having fun. She's really cute. I don't know. I think I like her. I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the
Mm-hmm.
pillars.
It kind of helps you
And
discover
sometimes,
like where you fall.
yeah, and sometimes you're like, okay, maybe I'm confused because I haven't really seen much of this yet, and I need to go discover this.
True.
Or
True.
I haven't seen their spiritual side yet, and so I need to go figure out if that's where I want it to be. Because usually attraction you can see pretty quick.
Yeah.
Maybe chemistry and intimacy you're not sure of yet, but
Mm-hmm.
and personality, of course, that can grow with time as well. But it's like,
True.
yeah, I just like to look at those kind of basic things and be like, okay, am I really interested, or do I just want to be interested?
Yeah. That's so interesting. I'm sitting over here kind of reflecting on a little bit of my history, my past. I was in about a year-long
Yeah, yeah,
relationship, right? And I had my hesitancies at different points of the relationship, and I feel like I tried to like even like literally make a graph and plot data points and go through areas of compatibility. And I feel like I did that periodically, but I could never quite pinpoint the hesitation. And it's so funny because the relationship didn't work out. So I'm like, that is another aspect of like just trusting your gut with someone. But it is
yeah,
so helpful when you kind of know maybe the reasonings, because then it just propels you to figure it out the next time. What do you think about just gut
yeah.
feelings?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Your gut your gut gets better with time. So
Mm.
if you don't have a lot of dating experience, to me your gut is worthless.
That's
like
funny. So your gut's based off
like
of
like
learning and experience.
yeah, and
Hmm.
it's hard to just have intuition based off of no experience.
True.
And so
True. True.
to me, like people that um like whatever, they come out of high school, they get off their mission or whatever, and they marry somebody super quick, always makes me nervous because I'm like, I don't think their gut knows what they want. They
Hmm.
just are like, oh, I met somebody that likes me back. This this feels awesome. This is new, and sometimes that works. Sometimes kind of double naivety works in your favor,
Mm-hmm.
but to me, yeah, to me, like I feel like I trust my gut implicitly, but it's
Hmm.
because I've been through so much, I've dated so much, like I just
Interesting.
know I know that my gut doesn't really steer me wrong, but it did in
Hmm.
the past. Like I look at when I was younger
That's
and
true.
my gut had bad brain.
Interesting. I feel like if you're over 25, 26, and you're dating and you're single, we need to adopt the idea of some of those younger kids that are just getting married and do it, because whatever you need to learn, you can learn with someone else. And I think sometimes you get older and you want to have more things figured out because you have more experience. But I think we lose the fact of like, you know what, we can try and try it together. If it is like, yeah, we both like each other, let's go for it. I think the older we get, obviously we get more picky and we know so many more areas in our lives. But I think these five pillars can apply to those young kids getting married, like at the same time, they're still it's still good not to go overboard with them, but also just doing things and acting, because that's how we get data and experience, I guess, huh?
Yeah, sure.
Do you think we need to be more like that? More just go for it?
I don't.
Okay,
I
why?
I would disagree.
Let's hear it.
I think, I mean, listen, I think the problem, if you're getting older and getting pickier as you get older, which is kind of a natural byproduct,
Yeah.
I think the I think the main problem with that is you need to you need to ask yourself, you need to be really self-honest and say, okay, I'm getting pickier, but am I becoming a better version of myself?
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
can I afford to be this picky? You know, because if you have a lot of dating options, in my mind, you can be picky. Like, because to me, like, really attractive girls are really, really picky, and as they should be. They have way more options, you know? But to me, if
Mm,
you're not working on yourself, whether that's whatever, whether that's physical fitness, whether that's your spirituality, your mental health, if you're not improving as a person, to me you don't really have the right to be pickier and pickier with each year, you know? But if you're a better dating prospect at 28 than you were when you were 21, you should be pickier, right?
interesting. I'm reading a book right now, though, that kind of is, at least on the girl side of things. If a girl gets past 30, honestly, dating becomes honestly near impossible. Okay, not near impossible, but it's so much harder because let's say a girl's 35. The 35-year-old men aren't going for 35-year-old single women. They're going for 26, 27, 28-year-olds. So
Yeah,
you,
listen,
you have to
listen,
just.
listen, listen, listen.
Okay.
It's not fair, but it is completely different dating experience as a man versus a woman. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I agree with you. As a girl gets older, unfortunately, this isn't my like philosophy. This
It's
isn't
just kind
my
of how it
idea,
is.
but girls' value starts to wane, right?
Mm,
Whereas a lot of guys, especially if they're successful and staying healthy, their value almost goes up as they age, you know, to a certain extent, to a certain
yeah,
number.
to a certain extent.
Um, so to me, it's like, yeah, if you're you just look at it like in the marketplace, like, you know,
Hmm.
we joke about dating, you know, going into the dating marketplace, but it's like it's pretty true. If you feel like within the market you're in, you can afford to be picky, then by all means be picky because you deserve
Hmm.
as best as you can get. But you have to be self honest and realize, okay, is my stock rising or is it falling?
Mm, true. Yeah.
And that's not, you know, I think age is a part of that, but there's
Hmm.
there's other factors. You know, if
Yeah,
you're
there are.
if you're if you're if you're a lot less healthy physically than you were 5 years ago, your stock is probably dropping.
Mm.
You know, but if you're like going to therapy and you're working on your mental health and you know your stock is rising. So to me you have to look at you just have to be realistic with yourself, right? And you have to ask yourself maybe some hard questions. But
And
I agree with you. It's infinitely different for women than men, unfortunately.
yeah, this book is called Marry Him: The Case for Settling for Mr. Good Enough. And like
Oh,
to a point you have to, everyone will settle because no one's perfect. That's the point of the book. It's not settling like
sure.
how you feel. It's just like you're not going to find Mr. Perfect because you're not perfect. Perfect doesn't exist, right?
Right.
So I kind of like, and it has so
And
much evidence in this of like these women passed up all these great guys and then they're 40 and stuck single. And this girl was interviewing groups of them and they're like, oh yeah, I passed up this guy because he was going to be bald or whatever. And they're like, oh, where is he now? And they're like,
yeah,
married. They're married, you know? So it's like they pass him up for
yeah,
these little things that in the long run they would have been completely happy with.
yeah.
So that's just something I've been trying to keep in mind. But I love that you have to always be like looking at your stock and maybe even taking those 5 pillars and reflecting them back into your own life and seeing like how you fall in each of them and in a sense what you have to offer, right? Is your stock rising? How are you bettering your life? And that's always what people tell you to focus on anyways when you're single. So
Yeah.
I think we've had some really good thoughts here. I had another thought and another question for you, but it has left my mind. So if it comes back, I'll bring it up. But I want to kind of full circle back to just passions in general. Do you have a favorite quote or something you love in your life that we want to end with?
Let's see. I'm a big quote guy, but they're usually like long paragraphs that I don't memorize.
Nice. That's all
um,
right. Maybe you can
let's
send one, we can
see.
post it.
Actually, you know what? I'm gonna. You think about your question real quick. I'm gonna find this quote real quick.
Yeah.
It's in my. It's saved. But this is definitely one of my favorite quotes. It's kind of about um, just how it's so easy in life to feel like you have the rest of your life to do stuff,
Okay.
and that life is long, and you don't really need to stress about it. But it kind of yeah, it kind of talks about how limited everything is. Um, okay, it's by Paul Bowles.
Okay.
Um, it says, because we don't know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. Yet everything happens a certain number of times, and a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood? Some afternoon that's so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it. Perhaps 4 or 5 times more. Perhaps not even. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20. And yet it all seems limitless. And so yeah, it's just to me a reminder, like um, everything you have in life is limited. Like you said, there's all these books you want to read. It's like you don't know the number, but you maybe have 400 more books you're going to read in your whole life, and maybe that's ambitious. Maybe that's if you read a ton. Maybe you'll only read another 25 books in your life. You know, um,
Hmm. Wow.
maybe you know there's certain friends that you see once every couple of years. It's like maybe you see them 10 more times in your life. Um,
Wow.
but you think, oh, I'll see him. I see him all the time. I see him once a year. It's like, but it's all very limited. And so I like to just kind of think about that sometimes, when I feel like sort of a general procrastination for life.
Hmm. I like that. A general procrastination for life. I get that. That resonates because that happens to all of us, right? That's, I think, part of being
Yeah,
human. So to reflect
yeah,
and remember, like what we talked about in the first half of this episode, reflect on those things that make life life. I like that a lot.
yeah.
And from today's whole episode, dating, loving life, passions, soul searching, depth, what is one uplifting takeaway you're going to take with you the rest of the week, the rest of the year?
Hmm. Let's see. I did the majority of the talking, so what?
This
Let's
can be
see.
anything you've been just thinking about lately, too.
Okay, yeah. Here's something I've been thinking about a lot, and this has to do with with my profession and my passions. But to me, I want to be I want to live sort of a prolific life. I want to put out a million podcast episodes. I want to write as many books as I can. I want to just put out, put out, put out, put out, put out, and I think you can use that same philosophy for really most areas of your life, even if you're not an artist, right? You be prolific in your friendships, you be prolific in your love, you be prolific in your kindness,
Hmm.
and you just put out as much as you possibly can, and you don't worry about any negative things that come along the way. You're like, well, that sucked, but I need to put out more kindness. Like I need to, like, that last podcast episode was kind of weird, kind of a bust, whatever. I need to put out another podcast episode,
Hmm.
and it's kind of a hard
Interesting.
mindset to have sometimes, but yeah, I just like the idea of, like, I look at my favorite, like, bands and artists, musicians, like
Yeah.
I love the ones that, like, almost every year they come out with a new album.
Taylor Swift.
And, like, listen, I'm a huge Taylor Swift
Me
fan.
too.
I love Taylor Swift with all my heart, and she's prolific.
Mm-hmm.
She puts out
Yeah.
amazing work year after year after year after year,
Yeah.
and shows no signs of slowing down. She's prolific with her concerts. She's prolific with her fans. She's prolific with her songwriting. She's just
Yeah.
across
It's
the
incredible.
board. Yeah,
I get why you want to be prolific. And I Googled what it means for those who don't have a good vocabulary. But it's like producing much fruit and like present in large numbers of quantities. So like producing a lot. And I think the more you try that, the more you might see failures, but you also will see more successes. There's like a trend on TikTok where it's like, go out and get rejected because so many opportunities happen and you build yourself up when you get rejected. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting theory. But I think my biggest takeaway from today's episode are those 5 pillars. I kind of want to make sure I'm including that in my reflection and just like
yeah.
who I'm becoming and who I want to find. And yeah, that was really helpful. And it's fun to get to know you. I'll tag you and people can look up your books and your podcast. Just awesome and
Awesome.
great things. Taylor, thanks for sharing your wisdom and your thoughts. And yeah, guys, check out Taylor Church. And it's called Of Soul and Stone. No, what's your podcast?
That's so almost close. Of Stone and Clay.
Oh, Of Stone and Clay. There you have it, guys. Any last words, Taylor, signing off?
Nope. Come. The easiest way if you're curious about the books or the podcast, just everything's on my Instagram. Just Taylor Church
Perfect.
44.
We'll tag him. Have a nice day, guys. See you later.